Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Psychic Medium Raymond Guzman, and today is Martin Luther King Day. Happy Martin Luther King Day to everyone out there. And today I'm going to be doing a psychic reading, mediumship reading on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So this has been requested, and I'm just going to give you exactly what I see, what I hear from Spirit. As a disclaimer for those of you that may be sensitive or empaths, or you may not want to continue watching the video if you are very sensitive, because I'm going to be putting up a picture of the killer who killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as well. So that, I'm just preparing you, that is going to be included here in the reading, because I'm going to be going over that information too. So when I get into Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s soul, I'm going to refer to him as Martin Luther. When I get into his energy, into his soul, you can tell this man came to Earth with a very specific mission and purpose, and that was to definitely create and elevate consciousness, just like many other celebrity people, that have been brought here to Earth, and some of you also that are listening. We all have a particular reason that we are brought here to Earth. He was able to touch the masses with his ability to talk to the nation, not just white people, not just black people, but everyone. When he spoke, people listened. His messages were very powerful. This was during the civil rights movement. He was an advocate against, he was an advocate to promote peace and equality among all African Americans, because, again, of the way that black people were being treated during the civil rights movement by white people. It was very ugly. It was very demoralizing. It wasn't humane. A lot of this was just pure evil by a group of people, that were just, the nation was divided. Just like it is now, it's still divided in many ways. But through his speeches, and through his movements and rallying people, what he was doing was getting the group and masses of people all over the world, white and black people, to really understand the magnitude of what was going on, the hatred that was there, and to awaken them and let them know that that's not okay to be treated, in a demeaning way. It's not okay for racism to exist. That he had that dream, like he said in his speech, I have a dream. And that's what he was doing through his platform. He was using it in a way where he was awakening consciousness and making people, because a lot of black people back then were, they were intimidated. A lot of people they were afraid. A lot of black people were afraid because this, what white people were doing to them was, spitting on them, beating them up, throwing things at them, denying them rights to go into cafes or to sit on the buses, or to even go on the buses. And when they would go on the buses, they'd have to give up a seat to a white person because, of all the segregation and crap that they instituted against black people. The mentality of these white people during this time, and I hate to use the word white people, black people. I don't like, using those kind of, but for the purposes of this video, so you can understand that's how it was. It wasn't just a human being. Back then in the 1950s, the 1960s, and even into the 1970s, there was so much segregation. There was so much of the division of black only. There was water fountains, for those of you that are newer generations that may, I don't know, because I'm not in school now, but when I was in school, we did have Black History through the month of February, and we back then, I guess the teachers, I had a black teacher, and she would definitely cover a lot of the, during Black History Month, the things that went on. And I got to see photographs of, they had in schools and places, public places, like water fountains that had signs blacks only or whites only. So the white people had their own water fountain to drink water out of, and the black people had their own water fountain. They had their own restrooms. It was just ridiculous. The segregation, the division was very ridiculous, and that's what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was doing. Um, he was eliminating, he was letting people know that it's not okay to be treated the way that they were, that racism in society was not okay, and they deserved better. And he was elevating that consciousness. And a lot of people, when you have someone that is considered, a black person or a minority, or however you want to word it, because people can word it in different ways or refer to people in certain ways, which I don't see. I don't like to use the word minority at all. I didn't find Dr. Martin Luther King as a minority, but just as a human being. He was a beautiful human being. And he still is. His soul is still a beautiful soul. But when I get into him, what I see and what I'm getting is that what Martin Luther was doing, he was using his platform, like I said, to elevate consciousness. And when someone like him is doing this, and people are coming to him because people could relate to him, black people, even white people could relate to him. There was a lot of white people that were not part of the racism. They didn't like what their fellow brothers and sisters were doing. They didn't appreciate what their families were doing, because a lot of white people didn't support that. They supported black people, and they wanted, they were against racism, and they were part of the civil rights movement. And when you have someone like Martin Luther that comes in and rallies people and awakens them consciously, a lot of the people in the government, a lot of people in powerful positions feel threatened. They felt threatened because he was someone that was coming in and showing people their worth and making them realize, hey, I am a human being. I do have rights. I have the same rights as a white person. I have the same rights as any human being, and I shouldn't be treated any different. And that's what people didn't like, what a lot of white people didn't like. They didn't like when someone is very strong-minded and very rooted in their faith, whether it's religious faith or it's a spiritual faith, like the work that I do and other healers do. People have a problem with it. They have a problem with it because they fear what they don't understand, or they don't like someone that is powerful and that speaks their mind and is unfiltered, because people just don't want to handle the truth. They were socially conditioned to believe, that white race was supreme, it was a white supremacy, and that there was the KKK was also in motion during all this time. So it's like, people's mentality, it's like a ripple effect. When you have one white person, and I'm just using this as an example, that is in a powerful position and speaks out against a certain race or color, just like we're seeing in today's society with Trump and that whole mess. When you have someone that is a white person and they are speaking out against a black person or any person, it doesn't have to be black. It can be a Hispanic person, a Mexican person, and they are in a powerful position. A lot of people are going to follow. It's like a ripple effect. Like if you have dominoes and you have them lined up in one domino, you push it over, tilt it over, and they're all in a straight row. All the other dominoes are going to be falling down as well. That's the kind of concept that this consciousness in the world was like. Because it was justified and people saw it on TV, all these civil rights protests and how white people treated the black people. A lot of other white people felt empowered to do the same. It's like mind control in some ways. I can't really explain it in a way but I think that most of you that would be listening would be able to understand where I'm coming from. That's the mentality, because I'm not going to try to get into a doctoral or try to be like a psychologist, because I'm not, but that is kind of how it is. People are influenced by what they see, how they grow up. People, a lot of these white people were influenced as kids by their parents. Even in today's society, like we saw recently with the MAGA group, the Make America Great Again group, that young boy that I believe he was 15 years old or whatnot, and he went up against with his classmates and whatnot against a Native American. While the Native American was there protesting or standing in a peaceful way, they went up against him, and it's been making news and headlines. But it's just disgusting how people feel entitled to treat other people less than what they deserve. And I feel like this is what Dr. Martin Luther King was facing. When I tune into his soul, one of the questions that I think a lot of you would be asking: did he hate white people? Did Dr. Martin Luther King hate white people? And what I'm getting from him is that he didn't hate them. He didn't have hate in his soul. You can tell in his eyes he was a pure soul. He's human. He may have made mistakes in this life with his personal life, whatnot, but he had a beautiful, pure soul, and he really wanted peace among everyone of every race and every color. That was his dream. He was a very inspiring angel here on earth. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an angel here on earth. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They want to judge him. There was people that try to, talk about his PhD that he had plagiarized as part of his dissertation, which is ridiculous. Like people coming in now that, future generations in the present are trying to discredit the man for his work that he's done simply because he's black. And I think a lot of people that are, black now, that are black living right now in society with Trump and everything that's going on, there is a divisiveness. There is a division. It's like we're taking steps back to the 1950s, 1960s, when all of this is, racism hasn't gone from the world. It's still there. I've been a victim of racism myself. I may look white, but I'm not white. And I think a lot of people don't realize it. Just because a person has blonde hair, blue eyes, they're not necessarily a white person. I'm not white. I'm a mixture of different races. But that's not even why I'm bringing this up here. But I'm just talking about is that a lot of you even haven't even said on my videos, that racism, you'd like for me to do a video on racism. And that's why I'm bringing it into this reading, because it's still alive today. It's still very prevalent. And it's not just white people against black people. It's white people against Hispanics, white people against Dominicans, white people against Asians. It's even black people. I'm just going to say there's even black people against whites, black people. But there is a certain reason. Now, I'm not justifying why black people feel, because like I said, I'm part black myself. I understand why a lot of the black community feels the way it does towards white people. Because out of all the races and all the discrimination, you have to go back into history. You have to go back into slavery. You have to go back further into history. Black people have always been the victims of racism. It's very deep rooted. The crimes committed against black people are way more prevalent than any other race. And so I understand why my brothers and sisters out there feel the way that they do against white people or other people. There's this sour taste in their mouth. There's this feeling, that black people are always going to be mistreated. We've seen it recently with Trayvon Martin, with other cases out there, the Black Lives Matter movement. These are movements that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. soul is telling me that he's very proud of. He's proud of these movements that are trying to bring order into the world, because he had that vision and he wanted it. So he's proud of all of you out there that are, pushing past the racism and just really trying to fight for rights and equality and to eliminate corruption. That's what he was about. He wanted to eliminate corruption in the world, and it's still something that is very prevalent here on earth. And but like I said, being that I am part Hispanic, part black, part Italian, and Native American, I'm a mixture of that. I understand as I go back into history, as I see my brothers and sisters out there, black people, I understand where you're coming from. I feel for you. I feel your pain. I know the injustice. It's wrong. will racism ever be eliminated from the face of the earth? That's the question a lot of people have been asking. Will it ever end? Is there ever an ending? The answer for that, what I'm able to get from spirit and what I'm able to see is that it's never going to go away entirely. But as consciousness elevates, as people shift into that fifth dimension way of thinking, slowly but surely, newer generations that are being born, these are going to be star seeds. These are going to be crystal children. These are going to be enlightened beings that are coming to earth to bring that peace and bring that unity. So although there will still be dark souls here on earth that still believe in racism or still practice that, there's going to be a lot of peace restored and equality, and a mutual understanding. After all this that is going on with our government and the person in power right now, after all this is said and done in the future, I do foresee that there is definitely going to be peace. There is gonna be a point of peace being restored. It's gonna take a lot of cleanup, a lot of healing, but people will come together again, and it's gonna happen eventually. If I had to put a number on it, I would say within the next 50 years. I know that sounds ridiculous for a lot of us. A lot of us won't be here, but our future generations will be here. Those of you that have kids. I don't have any kids, but those of you that have children, their generation and your grandchildren will be able to witness this. But I do feel like as consciousness elevates, as we're going into different centuries, the world is elevating, and that's what Dr. Martin Luther King is sharing. All of this that I'm channeling right now is coming from him, in what he's able to reveal to me. So I know that sounds like I'm rambling, I'm just going off in a tangent, but this is what I'm connecting with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and what he's explaining to me. He's not angry at how he passed. He was upset in the beginning, when he transitioned over. And I'm going to get into the murder and what he is revealing to me about that. But what he wanted and what I feel like his wife and his children have felt his soul with him. They have felt his soul with them, and they have, they are upset. I do feel like a lot of his children and family were upset and they're still upset, and they're angry, and there was this anger for a moment of time, and it's still there. A lot of the wounds that haven't healed over time are still very open because of the society that we're living in. That's what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is saying. The way that the administration is being run now, all the injustices that are being made more public, these acts of crime against black people, that is the division in the world right now. That is what's keeping that state of racism and prejudice against people alive still. But again, there is going to be healing. There is going to be a time in which all of this is being removed, wiped clean. A lot of the older generations of people who were very racist, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is saying that a lot of the older generations that were part of the civil rights movement, they're dying off. These are the darker souls that were here on earth, and that have, procreated, and they've made children, and that they've passed on this a lot to their children, which are now like the baby boomers, that generation, and then the children of the baby boomers. These are the people that are still kind of, there's a lot of racism still, and then there's a lot of souls that have reincarnated that were alive and died during the civil rights movement in their darker souls. And what I'm getting from him is that he's saying that, a lot of people are questioning, well, why does God allow this? Because, I'm not religious myself, but Dr. Martin Luther King was very religious, and he believed in God, and I believe in God, but like I said, I'm not going to get into religion. But a lot of people would be asking, well, why does God allow racism to exist in the world? And the question for that is, it's a universal power. Racism is equivalent to darkness, and love is the equivalent to light. And without darkness, there cannot be light, and without light, there cannot be darkness. There's a balance in the world. So hate and racism and stuff like that is always going to be in the world, but it is eventually going to heal, and a lot of people are going to awaken. People that are blinded and that have been conditioned. People are a lot of times a product of their parents. They're a product of the upbringing and the teachings that their parents bring onto them and poison them in many ways and condition them to be a certain way. And that's what Dr. Martin Luther King was saying, that it was definitely something where he didn't want people to be treated in this kind of manner. He wanted them to experience love and to understand their self-worth and to understand where they were coming from. So you know any reading that I would do into his soul may not be deemed good enough for some people out there that would be listening to me. I'm coming from a place of love, and this is what I'm channeling from his soul. He wanted to move away. He didn't have good nights, where he didn't sleep very well towards the ending of his life. I feel like he stayed up many nights writing, reading, praying. He prayed a lot. He cut through a lot of the crap that people were trying to make people fearful. He did have a lot of threats sent against him, people that tried to intimidate him, and these were coming from the government. Like I said, the people in power in the government didn't like whoever was in office at that time. They didn't like the fact that he was being a prominent figure and was kind of, able to inspire the races and the masses to waken up and see the crimes against racism and against inequality. He wanted equality, and so a lot of these people in the powerful positions were trying to silence him through fear tactics, through putting him in jail, through doing all these things that they did to him in this life, and yet he was still able to hold his head up high and be in a vibration of love and bring that into the world. And that is what is so admirable and so powerful about Dr. Martin Luther King. And he's not just an icon, but he's someone that continues to live on through each generation, and his name will never be something that will be obliterated or that will be erased from history. He is an integral part of history. Him with Rosa Parks and all of the others, Malcolm X, all of the civil rights and people that that made movements for equality, for justice. Some of these movements were more violent in nature. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s was in a state of love and that vibration. So now I'm going to get into the next slide here. And this is the killer, the guy that killed or that murdered James Earl Ray. He's the one that shot Dr. Martin Luther King on that balcony at that hotel. What I'm getting from his soul is, and again, I have to be very careful here because it's a very dark soul, but James Earl Ray was someone that was very hateful. Was he a racist? That's the question. Yes, he was. I do get, and I don't know if this has been documented or speculated in the history books, or if people will even acknowledge this, but I do feel like he had connections to the KKK. Now, people wouldn't normally would say that, they wouldn't, because a lot of people are based on quote unquote facts, things that have been put out in the text, but a lot of the things that are put out on media are not true. But I do get that he had connections to the KKK, whether he was a member or he knew somebody associated with that organization or he had friends. He definitely had ties to the KKK. I also feel like he was approached by people in the government, but this was all a cover-up story. Was he hired by the government to take out Martin Luther King? It's very possible. In his confession, he pleaded guilty, and then he pleaded that he wasn't guilty. And he said there was this person, I believe the name Raul, that was supposedly, there was somebody else that had done it, that he hadn't pulled the trigger. I do believe there is some certainty to a lot of this. Was he the one that shot Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Yes, I do get that. But I feel almost like what I'm getting from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s soul is that there was definitely a lot of, this wasn't a one-man thing. It was definitely a planned murder to get him out of the way. And there was other people involved in this that would have coerced James Earl Ray into doing this, whether it was like paying him money and making promises for him. It's very intriguing that he didn't get the death penalty. He got life imprisonment. Regardless of the circumstances, had this been a black man that would have done that to a white man at that time, I feel like they would have gotten the death penalty, and it wouldn't have been any other exceptions. But like I tell you, money and corruption, uh, they have a way of twisting things and making things different for certain people. And I do feel like for him, the government, knew, and he knew that if he said anything, he was threatened that he was going to be killed in prison. So I do feel like what they did was like an arrangement or agreement that they would spare his life, given him through the justice system. But a lot of these people were paid, giving him life imprisonment, which he got he thought that he was going to get away, and all of this was going on. But he is a darker soul here on earth, that was here on earth during the time. If you look into his eyes, you can see so much hate. His face had been facially reconstructed as well. He did have a rhinoplasty, so he definitely is not the same person as when he was born. His face did change slightly, but he just had, if you look in the eyes, you can see a lot of hate, a lot of anger, hatred towards black people, hatred towards even white people. I also feel that he may have even been abused at one time as a child, beaten. There's definitely he had some mental issues in his mind. He wasn't very sane, a very darker soul here on earth. And through his darkness and through what he did, he also faced a lot of death threats by people while in prison. And there was a lot of people that were not happy with James Earl Ray. And he ended up, contracting supposedly hepatitis C, and, having some liver failure and whatnot. He died in a hospital. But I do feel like he got karma served here in the physical world. Maybe not to what some people would have wanted him to get, but life imprisonment itself is like karma. It's here on earth. And I don't feel like he will ever reincarnate. That's a soul that is going to be always in the lower realms of the spiritual realm. And if he was ever to get out of that, he definitely would just be, a soul there, in the spiritual world, not being reincarnated again. A lot of these darker souls don't reincarnate after they leave the physical world. But this is what I'm getting from all of this. I don't feel like even when he's on the other side. But I don't get that he has any remorse at all with his soul on what he's done. I don't get that that will change anything. And I do feel like when he got into the other side, he was faced with a lot of this life review, with a lot of that, of his poor decisions and a lot of pain. I get a lot of pain from his soul. So yeah, he's definitely something that was a very dark creature, very dark entity here on earth. I want to say he was even, possessed in many ways, influenced by darkness, just a dark energy that surrounded him. And again, darkness doesn't like light, and Martin Luther King Jr. was light. He was definitely light. And his soul, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s soul, is in peace. And he is someone that is working now through the consciousness, just like Harriet Tubman. He is someone that's like an ascended master on the other side, working with people to elevate consciousness and create peace here on earth, working with a lot of souls, influencing a lot of souls as a teacher. People that would work with him or that would channel Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they would be like a lot of activists, people that are working as human rights activists, or people that are working against, inequality. And he's working for equality. That's what he's doing on the other side, helping people elevate consciousness here on earth as an ascended master. So this was my reading for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. If you would like to book a private reading with me, you can do so on my website, and it's listed here on the screen by going to www.raymondguzman.net/shop. It's also listed in the description box below. Also, be sure to pick up a book, my book, Starseed Footsteps. It is available on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, and basically it speaks about different spiritual topics, everything from what happens to when we die, to crystals breaking, crystals that you can use, twin flames, etc. So please enjoy it, and like I said, blessings and love and light, and big angel hugs to everyone out there. Thank you so much.